everything you're doing. To all the sponsors gathered here today, thank you to the chamber for convening us, and to the elected officials and everyone that's tuning in today for this very important message, I hope. And want to share on a variety of topics and kind of offer just some general perspective, some areas that we're focusing on at the sheriff's office, and hopefully stir up some discussion. And it's always great, in my opinion, when we could leave the session with more questions and wanting to talk more. So hopefully that's the result in the end. And the chamber, I want to commend them as well, because for many years, public safety has been at the forefront of a lot of their efforts. I know, going back through my professional life and having been a business owner as well during a certain period of my life, that business is a foundational piece of our economy. We need to make sure that businesses are thriving, that the community feels safe, that residents feel safe. And that's always my North Star every day. I want to make sure that our Harris County residents have the best quality of life, and that they feel safe in their businesses and as they go out and about. Our north areas are perhaps our most busiest in unincorporated Harris County. District 1 has historically been our busiest, and that primarily is all of the 1960 corridor, really ranging for us from North Freeway 45 all the way to about 249, and then District 5 picks up in Northwest Harris County as well. So we believe a lot in collaboration. We work very well with the amazing constable leaders that are there, from Constable Herman and his team to also Constable Heap in West and Northwest Harris County. We have very good working relationships. We collaborate, we communicate, we support one another. So really give kudos for them as well for being a great partner. Also, I know that Commissioner Cagle was mentioned here. So we work very closely with his office on different needs, and we greatly appreciate his support on Commissioner's Court, and he's been a great leader on the court. So we appreciate him. We know Commissioner Raddick, retired, a while back, but we're excited for to continue to work with his office, and Commissioner Ramsey. Now we know he's a strong advocate for public safety. So again, it's about collaboration. I don't know about any agency that could do it by itself, whether they're in governance or public safety. And I think the public appreciates collaboration. It's a better return on investment. We have to be good stewards of taxpayer money and make sure that we're all pursuing good governance. And so that's what we're about. In my world, again, it's looking at it through the lens of public safety. With a region as big as ours, it's a challenge. We cover a range of 1,700 square miles. So we see the gamut of what happens every day. We've been able to respond, like we know, from extreme weather events such as Hurricane Harvey to the most recent winter event, making sure that we're weather prepared and able to respond to our community in their time of need, to industrial accidents, especially down in East Harris County, whenever there's been an industrial type, situation, as well as the daily crime that occurs in a big metropolis. Historically, we remember that more of the suburban areas were at times considered to be a lot more safer. We know that that's changed over time, and they become much more urbanized. So we need to make sure that we have a law enforcement agencies that believe in a nimble response, that are flexible, that are proactive and aggressive, so we could meet that demand. Because we do see that there's still a lot of robberies and other things that occurred in those districts out there. Of the two, our District 5 area, which is more that 290 corridor, has fared better. But our District 1 area, we're trying to make a lot of inroads in keeping the community safer. So a couple of the things that we've done is we formed early last year what we call crime reduction units, CRUs. What those units are, they're designed to be proactive, to go out there and aggressively combat crime. We've been able to recover a lot of weapons that have been possessed illegally, that have been stolen, and we know that many times they lead to criminality. So we're really seeing success with that, and we're real excited about continuing to see those works. We their works. We have a regular check-ins with them to make sure that they have all the resources that they need, so that we can make sure that we're deploying all your resources that you provide to the sheriff's office in a smart way, and making sure that we're responding to crime and picking up trends as well. Historically, in policing and specific to the sheriff's office, we haven't always been very data driven. When I took office 4 years ago, I decided to start advancing more in that area. So we're becoming a much more of an analysis driven agency, both in how we deploy resources and also measuring, key KPIs, key performance indicators. So we're definitely moving more in that direction. It's not always an easy lift. We do operate within a bureaucracy, but I always say that as an elected official, it's important for us to make sure that the bureaucracy is serving the people, in this case of Harris County. So we want to make sure that we're working smartly for the residents, and we're going to continue to advance that. So we are investing a lot in our data, making sure that we refine the data and that we're much more aggressive. We're also working with external partners, academic partners. In fact, we've chosen, North Harris County, the area that you cover out there, to be pilot regions for us to really focus in on crime. All of that 1960-45 corridor is one of our busiest. We want to make sure that we're proactively addressing crime, not only after the fact. I think policing, we're always good at that, but unfortunately the crime's already occurred. We want to become much more smarter of targeting those micro zones where what are the root causes for crime? Because then hopefully we could nip it at the butt and make sure that it's not continuing and that we don't see longstanding trends. So we're aggressively working on that, but those crime unit reductions are really, really paying dividends for us. Also, I launched in response to the high number of traffic fatalities that we see, especially along the 290 and 249 corridors. We now have traffic crimes unit that are proactive in trying to address this epidemic that we're seeing throughout all of Harris County, which is illegal street racing and racing. In fact, out there near 290 and the Beltway, a couple weeks ago, we had a couple individuals that died through some speeding that was occurring, and so we're seeing an uptick in that. Our team is being very proactive in addressing that. It really takes community response to that. And we're not talking about your traditional car meets that maybe many of us grew up with, which, people just gathered, car enthusiasts, if you will. These are sometimes illegal enterprises. They're leading to spectators becoming hurt, drivers being hurt, innocent people on the roadways that are getting hurt. We're also ramping up our DWI units as well. We continue to see high numbers of people that are driving impaired throughout our county. Our region typically is one of the highest number in all the country in terms of fatalities and DWI arrest, sometimes hovering around the 15,000 per year mark in terms of DWI arrests. So it's a tough challenge, but it's something that we want to make sure that, again, we're working collaboratively. We work very closely with Constable Herman and his team on different initiatives. They support us, we support them, as well as more broadly in some of our other areas that we're leading initiatives as well and supporting others that have them. So we're tackling that crime as well. In District 1, again, that 1960 corridor going into Northwest Harris County, we also have we're focusing on package theft. It's one of the key areas in our region where we're seeing a lot of, we know that online delivery has increased tremendously. And so we're seeing a lot of predators that are out there focusing on those crimes, either targeting some of the delivery companies, your delivery services, and stealing packages and all that. So we're now ramping up our use of technology, proactive policing, to try to really focus on North and Northwest Harris County, leading different initiatives to try to curb that as well. And so we're focusing on that. One of the unique facets of operating a sheriff's office, many times we get asked, what does the sheriff's office do? What's the difference between you and, let's say, the Houston Police Department? Well, we're all law enforcement agencies. This region has many, but the difference with the sheriff's office is that we also operate the county jail. As my friend Larry alluded to, we do operate the largest jail in the state. the third largest in the entire country. So we have a large system. We operate a city within a city. Our population as of this morning is 8,800 individuals that are incarcerated in our county jail. And so we spend quite a bit on incarcerating people. We also spend quite a bit on medical. Every year we spend over $60 million just on medical care for those under our care, because it's a mandate. We have to provide medical care. They aren't out in the free world and able to access medical care. It's a real challenging environment. In the modern era of policing, law enforcement is in the front lines of two important issues. We're in the front lines of mental illness and addiction. Over the years, historically, we've taken more of a criminal justice approach to it. In my personal opinion, it should be more a public health response to those issues, because incarceration alone isn't going to get us out of these problems. We're going to continue to see repeat people being arrested over and over. And so we've got to make sure that we're being proactive when we can with those individuals that perhaps have slipped up. And sometimes you'd be surprised. Sometimes it's young people that get caught up in drug activity, and it's going to impact their future long after the arrest. We understand that that could impact financial aid, it could impact work opportunities and other things. And so when it's possible for us to work on being part of corrective action so that person doesn't reoffend again, gets back on track, then we want to be helpful. We also have a lot of military veterans that end up incarcerated in our jail. We have an amazing program catered to veterans in our custody, so we could get them back on track, that they can, you know, many of them have fought and defended our freedoms abroad, and yet they come home and are grappling with addiction, alcoholism, and other things, PTSD. And sometimes it's in the county jail where they first find access to resources and treatment. And we want to make sure that they get back on track, are able to use the marketable skills that they have to be able to do better. At the same time, we know that we must also hold the line. We know that we have many individuals that are chronic offenders. We know there's been a lot of discussion around that topic in our region, and that's something where we must be smart. You know, I've always said that we should be thoughtful in our approach to this. You know, I do believe that our jails need to be primarily for those that pose the greatest threat. There are ways to better address that, and it should be focused on risk. We should not be doing wholesale releases or releases that just create a revolving door, because it makes our communities less safe. With that said, my experience has taught me that there's also individuals that are good candidates to be released that shouldn't be in jail, and for us to be spending a lot of money to just keep them here. You need to keep in mind that of our 8,000 individuals, 8,800 individuals that are incarcerated, just to put a little bit of context on that, over 70% are considered pretrial individuals. One of the distinctions between county jail systems and prison systems is that they primarily haven't been convicted yet. Most of the individuals here are simply navigating the criminal justice system. We end up 9% of our jail population are self-described as being homeless individuals. Over 70% have a mental health indicator, which means that at some point they've been perhaps suicidal, they've had suicidal ideation or some other mental health issue going on. 36% of our incarcerated population are at least on one psychotropic medication, which means that as a community, we're footing the bill for them to have mental health treatment in the county jail system. It's very costly. Those medications are very costly. So we're trying to manage and triage that population inside a jail system. All what we're managing a pandemic, by the way, which has also been a different added to the perfect storm, if you will. And we also have a large population, for example, we call the geriatric crowd, that we have over close to 1,000 individuals that are in the range of 66 and over, 55 and over, which maybe have aged out, but maybe had an old warrant, that a case that hasn't been dismissed. And so we're also grappling in Harris County, and this is the entire criminal justice system, with a serious backlog of over 45,000 felony cases. Even if another felony case wasn't filed, we'd be looking at over 18 months of delay. Well, to me, justice delay is justice denied for everybody. Many times those cases become dated. Witnesses' recollections of a crime may become faded. People move away. And so many times, unfortunately, those cases could end up being dismissed. And so that doesn't lead to a good outcome. We need to make sure that people are being held accountable. The average length of stay right now in the county jail is over 200 days. And with those delays, it just becomes, again, much, much longer. And so we've got to make sure that we're being smart, because it's not, when we can't deliver justice to survivors of crime, then that's a serious concern. And so we got to make sure that we're more efficient, in my opinion, as a county. So these are all things that we're grappling. Also, domestic violence. We know that a couple of years back, over 40% of our murders had a nexus to domestic violence. It's an issue that has really grown. I said at the beginning of the pandemic that we would see the numbers of both child abuse and domestic violence increase, because at the time people were having a shelter in place, issues that were already in place, different dysfunctions only become amplified when people are in tight quarters. Those conflicts remain, and we've seen an uptick in domestic violence and also child abuse, because children that before were reporting to school and had teachers and other support personnel to maybe observe suspicious behavior, that additional set of eyes was no longer in place. So we didn't have those referrals. So many times we're seeing an uptick now in child abuse. And also, speaking about children, we did a study in 2017 that was very enlightening to me and to us. Every year in our county, we have 90,000 children that have a parent that's incarcerated in jail. I want to repeat that. 90,000 children that are incarcerated in our jail. Why is that important? It's important because, for me, I try to view our system beyond the proverbial four walls of a county jail cell. I want to see what's the future going to look like. And what I see is, we know statistically that is, if a child has a parent that's incarcerated in jail on parole or probation, the likelihood of them becoming justice involved becomes about 60 or 70% as they become older. So we know that in the future, not only do we have to deal with crime now, but also in the future, if we're not addressing that proactively and dealing with the trauma that sometimes comes through incarceration to these children, where it's no fault of their own, then those impacts are coming out in the classrooms. And often it's undiagnosed because we simply deem them as being at risk, troubled child, whatever, and nobody's really dealing with that trauma. And that's going to impact our workforce. It's going to impact our crime rates in the out years. And so these are all things that we care about very much at the Sheriff's Office. We're also doing a lot of innovative programs. We're working with our constable partners as well in approach to, for example, we equipped many of our deputy constables, our deputies now with iPads, using technology. So when they respond to a crisis call, now they have an iPad where they could connect in real time with a mental health clinician. So we could hopefully really address and better triage those situations out in public. So when somebody's going through a crisis, whether it be a suicidal teenager to someone that's off their medication, that we could give them a better response, and hopefully those situations don't become deadly, both for obviously law enforcement, but also for the community member, that it could be your loved one that we're trying to protect. So that's working very well. We're also working on programs to better address engagement with individuals on the autistic spectrum as well. Our Project Guardian is better training our deputies and working with community partners to better address those that are impacted through autism, so we can make sure that we have a more compassionate response to them as well, that we understand that sometimes there's certain behaviors that, if not understood, could appear to be threatening, but in reality, it's just we have to better learn how to de-escalate those situations. We know that there's a lot of different stressors in the community, and so that's an important thing that we're trying to address. So just giving you a laundry list of different things. Hopefully something there piques your interest. I'm very passionate about serving. I'm very passionate about just helping others. In my own career, my most impactful memory when I was in grade school was learning that my father couldn't read and write. So that really illuminated for me a desire to help others. In my case, helping others navigate a criminal justice system, making sure that survivors get get uh, get justice. Those that may end up being incarcerated because, for example, we have a high level of illiteracy inside with the with our jail population. So all these are community issues that we deal with in our criminal justice system. And my goal, as we look at programming, sometimes is it's with an eye towards trying to reduce recidivism. Historically, we know that when somebody leaves the state prison system, within 36 months, about 70% are going to reoffend again because there's very little job opportunities. Nobody wants to house them. Nobody wants to get them reintegrated back into the community. And so many times, statistically, we know that they're going to reoffend, and we don't want it to be one of your loved ones that becomes the next victim. And that's why we try to really, or I try to take a real thoughtful approach to these things. Sometimes we get it right, other times we know, but we don't. But we're really doing our best to be an agency that you can be proud of, that works closely with your chamber and others to really impact crime in our community and make sure that we're heading in the right direction. And I definitely feel that we're heading in the right direction in unincorporated Harris County. And so very proud of the body of work that we do. And our motto or mantra is always continuous improvement. We're going to continue to strive for that. And I'm a hands-on sheriff. I like being hands-on and being out there, and I will always work hard for you. And we're here to support you if we can do that, and look forward to answering any questions. Okay, see a question here from Mr. Miller, Cody Miller. What sort of community engagement is the Sheriff's Office planning already doing? Very good question. One of the things that we're really doing is we're really re-engineering and reimagining how we engage with our community members. We want to make it much more meaningful and powerful than just, let's say, traditional, setting up a booth somewhere and engaging with the community. We think that's important, but we also want to be more proactive. We want to make sure that we're tackling crime at different levels. One of the things that you're going to see is we're going to continue to be aggressive and proactive in addressing crimes. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have our crime reduction units. We have a violent crime unit. One of the things that we do now is whenever there's a robbery, a serious robbery, or a shooting or stabbing or something where maybe the person didn't die, we're still sending teams out there to begin investigating those cases, because we feel that the quicker we could address those serious crimes, then the better chance that we won't have a repeat offense or retaliation of some kind. But we know on the other side that it's important for us to better engage with our youth as well. So we're doing more things than just the traditional Explorers program that engages the youth. We're going to be much more engaged with them. We're going to make sure that we deploy deputies that could be problem solvers, that have more time to really delve into problems and really look at those micro zones and see what else they could be doing, not just respond to the crime, but really go in there and saying, if we know that we have, let's say, many times multifamily locations, obviously because there's a lot of people, it's high density. Many times there could be drug trafficking becomes commonplace, human trafficking, and we have to make sure that we're dealing with those core issues. If not, we're only dealing with the top level. We need to get in there and really deal with core issues and deal with those issues that are happening. So we're now going to be able to deploy teams into those areas to deal with it before the crime is happening. So it's going to be a much more proactive approach. Any work on task force on catalytic converters? Catalytic converters have been an issue for a long time. It's kind of part of the muffler in the back. Many of you maybe haven't heard of that term, but many years ago, copper theft, and other precious metals like gold, many times back when I was growing up, the big targets were stealing TVs and all that from your household. Now they're going for jewelry because that could be melted down and sold quickly. That's why when you see many of these shops that say, we buy gold, we buy silver, that have popped up all over, it's because they'll melt that, sell it. It's very difficult to trace. catalytic converters as well, even copper urns, believe it or not, in funerals. Some people have no shame. Sometimes those are targets to be stolen because they're sold, as wage theft. Copper lines and all that are stolen from, wiring and stuff like that. The, many utility lines sometimes are stolen for the different wires and all that, because it's a big business and big industry. We don't have a specific task force for it, but we are focusing on the issue. We do have a team, metals investigative team that's supposed to track that. It's a big issue around the county. We do not have a specific focused approach on that, but we do work those cases as well. Um, from Kerry Porter, I know Sheriff Gonzalez has been a true partner with higher education. How can Lone Star College better serve our community? I love Lone Star College. I'm very familiar with Chancellor Head, and it's, we're working with them on different projects right now as we speak, supporting them on some law enforcement policy work and things like that. We want them to be continue to be an excellent partner. And again, I'm a big believer in education, obviously from my own personal history, having seen the impacts of not having it through my father. And so we want to continue to work very closely with the chief of police at Lone Star College. We collaborate as needed on different things. And Lone Star College, again, the more we could prepare the workforce to make sure that people have a range of education options in higher learning, some from, 4-year degrees to workforce programs to all of that. It's very important that we keep people on the track to continue to excel. I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. I consider myself a lifelong learner. And so Lone Star College is an amazing partner, and we work very closely with them in a number of areas, and we strongly, strongly support them and their amazing board of directors, trustees. I'm very familiar with many of them as well. And it's just this top-notch academic opportunity. So thank you for the work from Lone Star College. What can the community at large and/or Chamber of Commerce do to reduce the impact of homelessness on our society? Does your homeless outreach team need more staffing or other resources? Yes, it's one of our top priorities. We have a very what we did was, we know that homelessness is not an issue that happens in the inner core of the region anymore. We've expanded our homeless outreach teams into every area of the county. And so we do have dedicated teams that focus on those encampments. It's a tough issue to deal with, because you're dealing with a lot of different issues. You have, there's a difference sometimes between, for example, homelessness, which could be because somebody maybe fell into hard economic times. Maybe it's a military veteran with mental health issues. And then you have street population that just kind of mix in with the homeless issue. They probably have a place to stay, but they hang out and intermingle with the traditional, let's say, homeless population, and they're more focused maybe on petty crimes. Maybe they're hooked on narcotics, and some will tell you, I have an addiction and I don't want to go to a homeless shelter, and we can't physically force them. And so we try to find a range of tools. Our team out there is well versed and proactive in trying to get to know who that homeless population is, to try to find housing for those that really want it. Others, the ones that really just want to stay out there, it's a little bit more difficult to deal with. But what we try to understand is, at the end of the day, is while they have a right to remain homeless, we also have to be proactive in dealing with the nuisance issues. And we got to make sure that we have to focus on all the population at large. And some of our county streets and public roadways and areas can't become just a free for all for anybody to just act as they want, with no kind of accountability, if you will, because everyone wants to feel safe in the community, and we can't start giving up our businesses and our communities for our quality of life to be diminished. And so we got to make sure that we're all working collaboratively. It's a tough issue. I wish I had a very, the silver bullet for it, but we have to continue to work with partner agencies. One of the things that worked well that I helped champion and launch in when I was with the city of Houston was a sobering center. It's called the Houston Recovery Center, where we try to find a more holistic approach to some of those issues. Because, like I mentioned, unless we're dealing with the root causes of issues of why people end up in homelessness, or in that case, what we did, for example, was we were finding out that every year we were arresting about 15,000 people for public intoxication, and we were just simply arresting individuals with no type of intervention. We changed that model, and now we take them to a center where they could sober up, where they could meet with somebody that could deal with the alcoholism. It doesn't, it's not a jail setting, but what we're trying to do is now that proactive intervention hopefully is helping more people. For some people, maybe one time scares them straight and they learn. It might be a business person that was at happy hour and drank too much, and doesn't want to lose their job or whatever. And so, and I'm not talking about DWI, I'm just talking about somebody being intoxicated in public. So by addressing it through that lens, we've saved millions of dollars. We've been able to get our police officers out on the streets much quicker to deal with more serious crimes. And we've seen that it works. That type of approach works. And so we think the more that we could find avenues for that, there's good opportunities. Like I said, many times we're dealing with homelessness and mental health issues in a jail system. And unfortunately, that's just not the best place to deal with it. Some things just require a public health approach. Those systems can deal with that much better than the criminal justice system. Our system is too costly, it's too big, and it's not the most effective way to. With that said, to address those issues, with that said, we have to strike the right balance, because at the end of the day, we are there to protect the public, and sometimes individuals just commit crimes, and we still have to hold people accountable. There's no, just because someone is struggling with mental illness or addiction doesn't give them a free pass to commit crimes. Sometimes they have to be held accountable, but there's also other ways where there's low hanging fruit that we could maybe redirect them to services that they need. Can you talk about homeowners association collaboration? Yes, again, we believe in collaboration. We like to work closely with homeowners associations. We try to do that through our different respective contracts, security contracts that we have with specific neighborhoods. We haven't done as much of that specifically with HOAs beyond that at a global level, but very open to doing that. So, if you contact us, happy to try to see how we could work with your home owners association to see areas that we could collaborate and address proactive crimes in your community. A lot of times we're very engaged in social media platforms, from our Twitter account to Facebook to Nextdoor as well. So encourage you to follow us on all those different platforms so you could engage, ask us questions, and we could see how we could collaborate with your specific HOA. Considering the rise in domestic violence during the pandemic, what percentage would you say it is? Like I said, 44% of our murders 2 years ago were linked to domestic violence. The biggest uptick last year was also due to domestic violence. So sometimes, we have to put in perspective. We hear that there's an uptick in murders. Sadly, our uptick in murders last year were a result of family relationships. There's an intimate partner that's involved. This is a serious issue that predates COVID. It's going to continue to be in place. One of the things that we did specifically in your geographic area is we launched what we call the SMART team, which is the Sheriff's Mobile Advocacy and Response Team, where we take a holistic approach. We send a deputy, crisis counselor. We could send sometimes a sexual assault forensic nurse to deal with on the sexual assault side of things as well, where we could really address these cases, because these cases sometimes become the most deadly for law enforcement to respond, as well as for the survivors. We know that when there's a high lethality whenever there's strangulation, for example. That's a strong predictor that case is progressing rapidly into perhaps a deadly situation. So we're really, in fact, I've been engaging with our team to really make sure that we're ramping up our efforts to better address domestic violence. We're seeing a lot of it. It's also underreported quite a bit, because we need to understand historically, law enforcement looked at it, well, it's a personal problem. It's behind closed doors. It doesn't we don't want to get in family matters. Law enforcement has really uh, uh, become more uh, knowledgeable since the 90s on this issue, where we know that law enforcement has to be more proactive in addressing this, because we know there's a cycle of violence that occurs. People often say, well, why, why I keep responding to the same calls? Why don't you just leave? Well, it's very difficult to leave an abusive relationship. We know that the person can sometimes just simply love the person, doesn't want to leave. We know that sometimes there's children involved. Sometimes there's threats involved. Sometimes they've been uh, isolated so much that there's not a support structure in place. They have maybe aren't working, have very low financial stability, and the male figure sometimes is the primary breadwinner. And so there's all these factors that people end up staying. So instead of being judgmental, we have to see how we could address that and get them to safety. So um, we're trying to deal with that. How is the detention and release program affecting crime for those lesser charges? And how is it affecting deputies and they're performing their duties? Also, how the early release campaign due to COVID affecting crime in the community from your perspective? It's kind of a broad question there. Like I was saying, you know, I think what we have to do is that we have to really get into an intentional based system of corrections. We need to make sure, and I hope that this legislature really tackles creating a wider net where we could hold people with no bail. That way, we could really focus on the crime, and we as Texans, we as residents in Harris County can really have more tools to say that, for example, if we're afraid of people that are committing armed robberies, that we could hold them with no bond, that we can make sure that we're adequately looking at risk properly and using risk assessment tools that judges have available to really look at who needs to uh, be in jail. Too often, what we see anecdotally is that people that shouldn't be out on bond or should be out by any means are the ones that are out, and those that are end up in jail, probably were lesser risk, maybe had a lesser risk score or whatever. And these are hard issues to really grapple. I think the criminal justice system is very fragmented. You know, the sheriff's office, we don't determine who stays in and out of jail. Ultimately, those are bail decisions that judges make. So ultimately, they have to deliberate over that and be held accountable for that. And we find that there's too many inconsistent bail decisions that are made. So for me, it's a clue that we're not assessing risk properly. And I would hope that they're using those risk assessment tools, really, really diving into that, and really, not that those are perfect, but it should inform decisions in terms of what's going to protect the community. And if we have repeat offenders, we must all be united to make sure we're not letting repeat offenders out over and over and over, because it is very difficult for individuals to arrest someone and then they see them out repeatedly. That doesn't work either. With that said, these are tough decisions. There are legal cases that are tied to this, not only in Harris County, but abroad, that are looking at the constitutionality of holding people during pretrial on bond. The Supreme Court has ruled on these issues. So it's not unique to Harris County. It's just we're grappling with trying to define what our system ends up being. And I feel that if we advance towards a more intentional based system where we truly keep those that are more violent, that pose a more serious threat, and there has to be some level of, give and take as well, where we can look at lesser people that, not lesser people, I mean lesser crimes. And these are no perfect scenarios. You're going to have people sometimes that have the money to bond out that commit crimes, and sometimes people that were let out on no bond, that on a PR bond, that are going to commit crimes. It's very hard to judge people's behavior. It's very hard to predict that, and these are very difficult decisions. But I think working with a thoughtful state legislature, making sure that we don't have advocate judges simply that may believe that no one belongs in court, in jail. Also, that they come into the middle as well, and we could really grapple this, and I think we could have a more effective system. In my opinion, we're not there yet. We also can't believe legally that. Remember what I said, that most of the people that are in our jail are on a pretrial basis, meaning we can't at the end totally escape from the notion that people are innocent until proven guilty, whether I like it, whether you like it, whether a deputy likes it or not. Our job is to make the arrest, and then we just have to allow the rest of the system to make the proper decisions. And sometimes they're going to get it right, sometimes they're not. I think that again, we could all create a better system, and we can't simply incarcerate people because we're afraid of them. My recommendation is to deal with the backlog that exists so that we can hold people accountable. And you know what? Send them to the state prison system. Send them all to the state prison system if the evidence supports it. But them simply being in no man's land, just waiting for court, isn't effective for anybody, in my opinion. Cases get dated, they end up getting dismissed. And so dealing with the backlog, I think, is where we need to focus, not necessarily releasing one group or another. I think that if the evidence supports it, let's hold them accountable. Let's respect the rule of law, and let's get them going and hold them accountable and sentence them to the proper sentence. But we can't use jail to punish people during the pretrial phase. And so I'll go ahead and turn it back to see if there's any other pressing issues. I could talk about these issues all day, and I know time is limited. Back to you, Bobby.
Thank you, Sheriff. That was wonderful. Very informative. Really, really appreciate your cerebral and humane approach to the job you do. And thank God you do this job, because I don't want your job. No. So keep up the good work. I really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone for the questions today. We got a large number of questions, which was great. So it means people are engaged, people are concerned. So again, thank you to our attendees today for showing up. Sheriff, thank you very much. Keep up the good work. I want to thank once again our sponsors for today's event, our keynote sponsor, the Lipton Agency, and our event sponsor, Lone Star College. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and with the Sheriff's permission, we will put his presentation on YouTube. So if you ever want to go back and check, you can do that. All right, everybody, have a good day.